How's it? So the last time we were chatting, we were asking the question, mind or matter, which came first? And we traced the timeline of evolution from the Big Bang until the arrival of man and the arrival of religion. And we discussed briefly about the soul and the afterlife and said we'd go in more detail there. But before we go there, we were asking the question, what is God? There have been hell of a lot of variations through time of what God actually is. Most of them related to deities and influenced by cultures, the Greeks, the Romans, etc. African as well from the ancestors, Australian from the ancestors, linked to a lot of religions obviously linked to nature and the forces of nature. I think an interesting sort of offshoot of all is the ancient astronaut theory or the ancient alien theory, which hypothesizes that an advanced civilization came to Earth and we are either descendant from that advanced civilization or that advanced civilization was instrumental in the creation of humanity. I mean, the concept of the ancient astronaut theory gained a lot of popularity most recently, probably with the Chariots of the Gods and Van Daniken and that generation of explorers and adventurers and researchers. And there was definitely credence to their what they are hypothesizing, especially with regards to the timelines that we understand of megalithic structures, etc. But I think the godfather of them all was probably Zacharias Sitchin, who wrote the 12th Planet, a book called The 12th Planet, and a couple of others, on his findings and studies of cuneiform text from ancient Mesopotamia, Sumeria, Acadia, and those countries in the period from about 6,000 BC up until about 1,000 BC, the main period of the text. Lots and lots of cuneiform writing in these clay tablets. So many, in fact, that there are hundreds of thousands still waiting to be deciphered all over the world in museums and vaults all over the world. So what was his story? What was the Sumerian story? But that was very different, okay, from all the rest. They believe that they had these super beings that were their gods that came from a planet called Nibiru. About 450,000 years ago, they came to Earth. And their planet was busy dying. The atmosphere was losing its atmosphere. And they had worked out that they needed gold, which would somehow ionize the atmosphere or something, and could save their planet. And the planet closest to them with gold resource deposits was Earth, and they had come to Earth to come and mine gold. So they sent a party to Earth about 450,000 years ago, and the head guy's name was Kako Anu, and he had he had a lot of kids, okay, but his sons Enlil and Enki, they came to Earth and they started mining with a whole big party. It's a complicated story. It's like Dallas. It's like a soap opera. It's so complicated, with a lot of generations of these gods, because it was a period of time that they came at 450, and then over generations, they were mining, and then they started fighting. The younger guys started rebelling against the older guys because they were made to do all the work, and they had a hell of a war, a nuclear war in fact, and destroyed each other, and eventually reconciled. Some guys were sent outcast, some guys went back to Nibiru, and a decision was made to manufacture a working species using the local inhabitants of the planet, which were hunter-gatherers, and do some DNA modifications and create a species that would then work in the mines for the Anunnaki. And that species was humanity. And at first they made them increase the brain size and the intellectual capacity and gave them the powers of the gods, except at first they could not breed, And then later they were not given immortality. I mean, the orbit of Nibiru was 3,600 Earth years for one orbit of their planet around the sun. And they lived a hell of a long time. And when they created humans, we were not. We were given a three score years and 10 kind of vibe, you know. But finally, a couple of interesting things. This happened supposedly about 300,000 years ago, that the Anunnaki decided, and Enki decided he was going to make man. And he made man with the bigger intellect and the attributes that he could work. He had free will, he could make decisions, you know, he was way above the primates from where they came. Which is quite funny, because that's the same time that Homo sapiens arrived on the scene 300,000 years ago. So a hell of a bit of a coincidence. Obviously the guys who wrote, well, did the guys that write the book, the Phoenicians, see this? Did they know this 300,000 years ago, when this is in text from 3000 BC? Anyway, so they created a couple of other things interesting about when we changed the species, when the human did start walking upright. His brain size did increase, so babies could not be born with a full-size head because they would not be able to come out. So the brains were smaller at birth, which meant the incubation period went from a couple of months before, like the rest of nature, a couple of months, boom, and out the nest, off you go, China. Humanity, there was incubation of 10, 15 years to try and get a child that was big enough that he could actually look after himself. So that was a major change. What we were capable of changed dramatically, and we moved from a hunter-gatherer in a pretty short period of time into developing agriculture, urbanization, workforces, and money, all of a sudden overnight. So the question is asking the Sumerians, where did their guys come from? Where did these people come from that actually started their civilization?